I'm going to kick this off. My name is Glen Pembley, and I'm on a research and development team for a security company. And this talk was supposed to be on JavaScript deobfuscation. Well, that's what it says on the paperwork anyway. It's actually going to go more of taking a basic attack and walking through how malware gets from A to B. We're going to break down code. We're going to be deobfuscating some JavaScript, but it's not going to be an hour-long walking through JavaScript code samples. You know, it's kind of funny because I don't speak that often at conferences and stuff like that, but every time I've ever been asked to speak, it's always been after lunch, and half the people have always like fallen asleep during my talks. So it's a little interesting now that it's right before dinner, and
we're awake.
Yeah, you're awake because you're just
No questions now.
yeah.
Except for power cycle.
So hopefully this will be. Well, hopefully you're not asleep still halfway through it, but it should be about, I'm hoping, between a half hour, 45 minutes, and the reason why I kind of wanted to go over this concept or this talk is because when the salespeople in my company actually have me go and talk to people, I've talked to some really smart people, but I mean people that can reverse engineer a piece of malware better than I can, but they have absolutely no idea how the malware got into their environment. They have no idea how their IPS just completely let it go by, why AV didn't detect it, why, you know, all those other things. So what I'm going to do is just take this basic example and just from start to finish show how you can evade the IPS, how you can evade firewalls, AV, sandboxes, and all that stuff. Sound good? I didn't really also know what the level of you know, who I was going to be talking to exactly, so I apologize in advance if it's a little too basic for some of you guys. So there's only 3 slides that we'll look at. This is the most in-your-face slide. What it's kind of representing what we're going to be going over. So the first thing that, as a part of the attack we're going to look at is actually getting, you know, the landing page, how somebody, you know, how you get somebody to click on it. We won't really go into that too much. We're going to really start once you get to the landing page. And then from there, we're going to go really to the escalation, like looking at the JavaScript, looking at some JavaScript hackers, just some obfuscation in general. And then go over the concept of noise reduction. So we'll break down the code and look at how, after you deobfuscate the content, you know, in the JavaScript, how it looks at what operating system you're running, what browser you're running, different things like that, and then makes the determination on what exploit it's going to run. So we'll go through all that type of stuff. Then we're going to look at shellcode, and then, you know, actually break down the shellcode, not too much. We won't look at the assembly or anything, but we'll use some utilities that my group has written and show you what the shellcode was trying to do, and then show how that's an example of more noise reduction with evading sandboxes. And then lastly, the actual movement of the malware, so encoding and different stuff like that, and how, you know, things like magic numbers and just simple XORing could easily beat almost all host-based, you know, security stuff today. All right, so that's enough with the slides for now. So before we just jump right into the code itself, you know, we have to at least briefly talk about how people get onto the landing page, where they're actually going to get directed to get exploited and stuff like that. You know, you could spend days talking about social engineering and all that stuff, and honestly, it's kind of boring, but it's pretty interesting. Like, how many people in here are contractors for the government? It's kind of sad to me to kind of say this, but it is ridiculously simple to kind of target contractors in the military or in the government in general. You know, if it's a lot of government agencies have the bad habit of putting CTR at the end of their contractor usernames.
It's not a habit, it's a requirement.
I know they do that, but that's not the smartest thing in the world to do. You know, if you think about it, I've proved this point with a friend of mine who works over at DISA, that if you have, like, for example, whenever somebody sends out an RFP or whatever they call it to get contracts and stuff like that, it's all public domain. And what will happen a lot of times is that, I mean, it's public knowledge. You can see who wins the award and stuff like that. All you have to do to really target somebody and really make it simple to get somebody to click on your link is just look at who the sub is for that, because a lot of times they'll partner with a small company, like a really tiny company, and a lot of times they'll have their people actually look at proposals for other things. So by just doing a few hours of research into figuring out who won a certain contract, and let's say SAIC or whoever the big contracting companies are, they may have partnered up with little company A. You just start focusing on who works in little company A, and craft like a PDF or something and just send it to just those people in that small little company and say, hey, we're working on a new proposal. Can you open up this PDF? And just send it just to the people in their organization at .ctr. You'd be surprised at how many people click on it. Just like, oh, I'm going to help out, be a good soldier, and there you go, you got them. Now that's just kind of simplistic stuff. More as far as like targeting and getting people to click on things, Aurora happened a few years ago. Everybody's heard about that by now. But what's really interesting about that, in this case specifically, is that it was an exploit in IE6 that was actually vulnerable. And there's a couple of companies, but Google, for example, is one of the ones that got hacked. And you would never expect people in Google running IE6, correct? So what the people that they actually targeted were regression testers that they knew would be running those browsers, and because has anybody in here done any software development before? It's a pain in the ass to do QA and have all these different browsers and do different testing to see what will happen. So the people that, performed Aurora, they specifically focused on just the regression testers in these companies that they knew would be running those. So there's different levels of getting people to, focus on them, to click on certain things to get, what you need to do. So it's enough about that. Let's actually get to the landing page and start looking at some code, because that's really what we're here for, right?
It's probably worth mentioning that, if it's not targeted and somewhat wider spread, like exploit kits,
Yep.
ad injection, or, automatic SQL injection in the sites that then link back to this obfuscated JavaScript source.
Yeah, so as far as the just general malware, like black hole and different exploit kits, things like iframes and different stuff like that, a lot of them, based on a lot of the research and different things that we have on the technology that we create, my coworker Chris is here and he can attest to this, but there's like a really popular site out on the web today, girlsinyogapants.com. People are, it's all over the place, but it's infected right now because of ads that people put on there. So you'll open up the page and you'll look at, a girl in yoga pants, and there's a little ad on the side that's actually infecting you, and it's redirecting you to this landing page. It's kind of funny, but so things like iframes, everybody knows what that is. Pixel by pixel, you'll never see it, but your browser's smart enough to open it up. There it's redirecting you to open up just a little pixel size little frame, and in that frame it could be redirecting you to open up, basically whatever. Is that what you? Yeah. Okay.
It's primarily where you'll see stuff like this.
Yeah. So this right here, let's say this is our landing page. Technically our landing page in this attack, and this is actually a real attack from. It was an IE0 day that came out, I think, last April or May, so it's a little bit older now. But this is the entire code sample. It actually started from, this was the page, and it just redirected you, source login.js. So your browser's smart enough, you open up login.js, and this is what we have. And this is an example of a JavaScript packer. Tons of, like everybody here has probably heard of, obviously, really familiar with executable packers. And a packer is just a self-extracting archive. So, when you zip something, obviously you'd have to unzip it and then execute it. A packer compresses the object, and as it runs, it just decompresses and does what it has to do. The reason why, from an executable standpoint, people love to use packers is because it changes what looks like the content of the file itself, but the code is the same. So you can get around like signature-based AV stuff that are looking for certain MD5s and different things like that. The packer will actually change what the executable looks like pretty easily. Now, a lot of people that I've talked to, surprisingly, have no idea that there's JavaScript packers out there. And this, more than anything, is, you see tons of it if you really look for it. This, the reason why JavaScript packers are actually really, really hard to kind of deal with is because so many people on the web use them legitimately. If you go to almost any site on the web, any legitimate site, like big name site, they'll have their code obfuscated, and they'll use packers because they want to protect their intellectual property. So there's companies out there that are solely designed. This is an example of one. It's like JavaScript obfuscator. This is a pretty good one. There's another one, I forgot what it was. Maybe Chris afterwards can bring it up. But for $99, you can sit there and you can, it's a really solid packer that all they do is just are designed specifically to not allow anybody to deobfuscate the JavaScript in their code because they're protecting the intellectual property mostly on legitimate sites. And their whole purpose is as soon as somebody breaks the obfuscation, they just release a patch and then you have to start all over again. And if you ever wanted to actually get around security tools, the way a lot of hackers are doing it with JavaScript packers is by these tools. They'll spend $99 and there's really nothing you could do about it. An example of why security tools, even though it's easy enough to, the same with executable packers, is to be able to define it. For example, here, this is an example of the DNetworks packer. This has been around forever. Easily enough, you could write a signature that looks for something like this and say, when I see function PACKED. First of all, can everybody see that? Okay. It's easy enough to kind of define that and say, when I see this, I know this is the DNetworks packer. It's kind of a funny story. Back in 2007, you guys remember the Orchid social networking attack? A lot of people haven't heard of it. I have never even heard of the Orchid social network before until this happened. But this packer, the DNetworks packer, was around before the summer of 2007, and it was used legitimately just to kind of compress the content in the JavaScript in their page so the page can load and do all the stuff that you would legitimately use a packer for. And then around the fall of 2007, different hackers started using this packer for malicious reasons. So a couple of different security companies decided, whenever we see this, we're going to just start blocking the traffic and we're going to think it's bad. Well, all hell broke loose and people were they couldn't connect to their sites. And so the security companies relented and they took it off of their other DAT files and signatures and all that stuff because just the uproar of, looking at the function packed and firing on it just caused people just to go apeshit. So, so what happened was, like in the November timeframe, they took it off all the lists and stuff. And then in December, 700,000 people got their accounts exploited because on that Orchid social network with this, just using this packer alone. So it's, if you really wanted to get around, from a hacking standpoint, it's easy enough to define it and to be able to say, yep, that's that packer, yep, that's that packer. But people, security companies anyway, aren't going to start blocking them. So what we're going to do now is we're going to actually take this, and this is just a simple compression packer. There's nothing really special about it. What we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and put this into JS Beautifier, which is typically used if you're doing like JavaScript, coding and stuff, and you see when people just do normal compression, it's hard as heck to read. So you'll use this to just make it more legible. What you can do here, like in this site, I'm sure you guys know all about this. You can actually detect packers and obfuscators. It could do basic ones. Anything more like the next one we'll look at, it won't do too good of a job. So what we're going to do is we're going to just break this down, and this is going to be our first example of where the whole concept of noise reduction comes in. So just because you can obfuscate and get past the defense, you don't actually want to ever run your code if you're going to get detected when you do run it. You want to be as stealthy as possible. And this is just that first example we're going to go through. How many people in here just know JavaScript? Most people do. And even if you don't, you could probably just read this and figure out what it says. So the first thing we're going to do in this, when we look at it, is we're going to figure out what the operating system is that the code is calling for. So you can see here, it's just a simple, if-else type statement here, just basic logic. So if osinfo.index of Windows NT, you're going to return a value of ww50. And if that's true, then it'll continue on. If nt52, return this value. If 5.1, return this, so on and so forth. You'd be surprised, especially a lot of younger guys, have no idea about the whole NT stuff. Back in the day, NT40. They still actually, after NT40 came Windows 2000, that's when they really started naming the stuff. The machines actually, even today with Windows 7 and stuff, return back a value, things like Windows NT 50, 52, 6.1. For example, 6.1 I think is Windows 7 in 2008, release candidate 2. 5.1 is XP, I believe this is Windows 2000. And so depending on what operating system you're running, basically, it's going to return a value associated with that. So next thing we're going to look at here is the actual browser that we're running. So if you're running MSIE 8, return 8, 7, 7, 6. If you're running Opera, O, Chrome, G. It's just basic, simple logic, right? And this is where the noise reduction really comes into. So if operating system comes back ww51 and APPI, which is the browser, returns 8, open up this HTML page, login8.htm. Else, if operating system is ww51 and you're running IE6, go to this page. Everything else go to login.aspx. So you can see in this attack, the attacker really has two different exploits that that he has available to him. One that's going to exploit, like I said, XP is 550 would return 51, i.e. 8 and 6. So he has two different exploits for these different browsers and OS pairs. Anything else, if you're running a Mac or anything else, it's going to send you to this benign page. There's no reason to try to infect a machine that can't be infected and potentially, bring, notice to yourself, right? So let's pretend that I'm running XP in IE6 and go open up login6.htm. So here we go. We see this HTTP traffic, HTML, and here we see the JavaScript. Tell you now, this isn't typical JavaScript that you'll see in a web page. A whole lot of numbers. So before we deobfuscate this content and start looking at some more stuff, this is really where I want to talk about the whole concept of normalization. It's a pretty common term. Everybody's had some sort of familiarization with the term normalization. Well, the concept is, and this is really how we'll see this when you're dealing with later on in the attack as well, when you're dealing with getting around AV engines and different things like that. The whole concept of normalization is trying to take whatever the content is and gain value out of it. So in this case, let's say the traffic going across the wire, if you're from an IPS standpoint. If you wanted to evade any type of IPS, IDS, or network security device, in different ways, all you have to do is just figure out how that security tool tries to normalize traffic to be able to either, pattern matching or do whatever it does. If you know how it functions, you just have to make it so it can't normalize the data, gain a value, and then apply whatever it does to determine if something's good or bad. That's why JavaScript obfuscation is so useful in attacks today, because IPSs, IDSs, and different tools can't normalize the traffic in real time. As you'll see shortly, when we actually deobfuscate this content, every single network security tool in the world would be able to say, yep, this is bad, and fire on it. But when it's in this sort of format, it can't. Any questions up to this point? No, it's pretty self-explanatory stuff. So what we're going to do now is we're going to use this a little utility that we wrote. I'm going to extract all the JavaScript out of the HTML and just put it into one file. Whenever I type in front of a large amount of people, I just can't do it. So, and then what I want to do is I'm going to actually, there's another utility that it's a JavaScript wrapper that we're going to apply to this JavaScript thing, to the JavaScript file that we just created out of the HTML using the Google V8. Chris, he's right back there.
What exactly just happened?
So this is a utility that we wrote. It's a command line thing, but it's a JavaScript wrapper. So so the first part was we took all the HTML file, we pulled out all the JavaScript elements that were in the HTML file and just concatenated, aggregated into one JS file. And then we use this little utility that we have to basically deobfuscate the content and give us a dump file.
Does it emulate the functions that JavaScript would do?
How
How does it go through doing that particular process? Like there's V8 and there's SpiderMonkey.
So it's
Or is it proprietary?
it's kind of proprietary. Afterwards, I can explain it a little bit more. So Chris back there, he's the one that actually wrote.
Yeah. Okay. Hi, Chris.
So afterwards, we can discuss up as much as we can with it, if that's what you guys want to do. So here's the deobfuscated content. As you can see right here, I mean, anybody in the security field should know right away. It's a bunch of shellcode, coded shellcode. You can see the U0C90, U0C90. Right away, you know it's a heap spray. It's pretty, I mean, we're not going to break all this down. You can just see the looping and how the obfuscation actually happened. What we're going to do now is, actually, let me just, before we actually break, like take this shellcode and just show you what the shellcode was trying to do with another little utility that we wrote. I actually went on site one time with some salespeople, and I was kind of explaining the whole idea of JavaScript obfuscation. And one of the guys there was like, "Yeah, but there's only a few people that actually can make those big long lines of numbers and actually obfuscate JavaScript." And I kind of looked at him and was like, "No, actually, it's pretty simple. Like 99% of the people actually just copy and paste things. They don't really know what they're doing." So I showed him an example of this. It's actually really cool. It's called JJ Encode. Have you guys ever played with this? It's actually a really cool JavaScript obfuscating tool. There's also another one called JS four-letter expletive that begins with the letter F. Just Google it and it'll bring you to the site. It works really well as well. So I showed him this example of this little tool. Click the eval. You can, oh, sorry, that's obnoxious. You see alert, hello JavaScript. We popped it out here. And I showed him you can just change the variable name right here. So if I wanted just to change from, instead of dollar signs, I just wanted to use Glen as my variable name. You see it still works. It's quite simple just to change how the obfuscation works. You can even palindrome it. You have 2,203 letters, characters, just to obfuscate alert hello JavaScript. So it's a pretty cool thing. There's a ton of them out there. And I just showed him how you can just copy and paste your code into this and do exactly what he said it takes somebody that's crazy smart to be able to do. So I just want to kind of bring that up. So here we have our shell code, right? So now what we're going to do is we're going to use another little utility we have called, it's a really great name for it, called the shellcode detector. And what we're going to do is we're going to take a look to see what the shellcode was trying to accomplish. To make it nice and easy, all you gotta do is just look for the English. Can everybody see that? Let me make it a little bigger. So let me just scroll up a little bit before we look at that. You can see here, you see the different jump, call, pop, the byte offsets, the distance, the XOR key. So that what we just looked at before was we took the XORed shellcode, the encoded shellcode. We see this, IE Explorer, HTTP www MIT edu, and HTTP www cfird ca images top.gif. Pretty self-explanatory what this shellcode is telling your machine to do, right? Open up IE, go to these sites. Can anybody guess why there's two domains there? Why MIT is there? It's always interesting to see if anybody... Checker.
Check to see if it can resolve.
Yep. A lot of people just, they're like, I don't know, they want to go to MIT. It's like, no, they're not trying to go to MIT. So one way to, this is another example of noise reduction. And in this case, it's dealing with sandboxes. So it's a lot of people have, you know, different security tools and stuff that they live and die by. Like people just love IPS, people just love sandboxes, people just love everything. And the whole point of this this whole, you know, talk is to show how a single attack can beat all of them, you know, if they wanted to. So in this case here, it's going out to mit.edu to see if it can actually get out to that site. Now, in a real sandbox environment, there's no way that a sandbox allows you to get onto the network and do what you need to do. So if you're running in a sandbox and this tried to run, it would sit there and realize that it couldn't connect, and then it wouldn't actually go out to cfird.ca and pull down top.gif, which, as we'll see, is the actual piece of malware. There's a lot of cool different ways, like newer ways to go out there and do it. A lot of the newer sandboxes and stuff have ways to check for this. Some cool ones that I've seen recently is just checking the DNS cache. So what they'll do is they'll check to see if the machine ever connected to google.com. So everybody in here, I'm positive, has gone to Google before, so it'd be in your cache. Well, what some different attacks are doing is saying, have they ever gone to Google? Have they ever gone to these common sites that everybody's been to? If not, then it just cuts out. There's some cool ones with, saw one recently, it was actually a jar file. It was Tetris, and you'd actually have to play the game to get to 10,000 points before the attack kicked off. That was pretty cool. Yeah. So if you suck at Tetris, you're good. If you're too dumb, if a lot of other ones using, as far as like encoding content and sending it across, using the version number of the processor as the key to decode the content, sending the key with the attack. So just different ways like that to kind of evade a sandbox, because the chances of the processor being the same as the victim. Or another one is using the time of the machine. So especially if it's a targeted attack, using the system time as the key to decode the content. And unless everything is, we good? Okay. Unless everything exactly synced, it would never be able to run. So, yeah, here's slide number 2 that we'll be looking at. This is a pretty good, it's actually very technical. It's a great white paper. If you want to learn how to evade sandbox technology, it's kind of low, but ISE, go to this site. It's awesome. It'll take a little while to read. It's pretty long, but it's a great paper. All right, enough of that slide. So now, what we're going to look at is we know. Let's assume that we're infected. That we were in a sandbox. We're running XP IE6, and we went to cfird.ca images top.gif. So as you can assume, this is probably the GIF file is actually the piece of malware that's going to be coming down and getting us. So let's take a look at the top.gif file. Excuse me. So here, this is another, like the first example that we're going to be looking at in regards to some more noise reduction. So everybody knows what this is, right? GIF89A, it's the magic number. Everybody knows what that stuff is for, right? It tells your operating system what application to use to open the file. This is the easiest way to evade almost all host-based security tools and web gateways like content firewalls and stuff. The reason is it's the whole idea of down selection. So you can't look at every single thing coming across the network, right? So what AV and just different security tools a lot of times have to kind of narrow down their focus on things that are really malicious. Here is a list of some common magic numbers. Everybody knows, where's the mouse? The bottom one, the bottom two, the MZ header. Obviously, it's the Windows executable. Everybody knows when you find that. It doesn't matter if you rename the extension, hello.txt, the magic number is usually still MZ in the case if you're renaming it there. A lot of people, I find curious, have no idea that you can use ZM as well. So a lot of times if people are writing custom signatures looking for something, like file specific, they're only look for the MZ header and the stuff and have no idea that ZM even exists. So in the case of like antivirus and like web gateways and stuff like that, if they saw this file coming across the network, they would assume it's just an image file, right? It's a GIF file. How bad could it really be? I'm going to keep looking for executable files for MZ. Maybe I'm going to look for some, Java file, whatever they're going to be looking for. But the easiest way to evade those type of things is just to put the magic number in ahead of the file, and I'll show you exactly an example of using the Anubis sandbox. I'll just completely not even take a look at it. So what we're going to do now is we know the magic number says GIF89. It's not actually a GIF file though. What we're going to do is use another little utility called xfile that will take, it's actually an encoded file, and it'll decode the content and rip all of the actual encoded files out of the GIF file. So there's encrypted embedded files. We see here, so top.gif. First one is DLL is corrupted. That's what all those little question marks are for. Here you see the XOR key. It's a 32-bit DWORD key. It's a DLL. The last one's the actual executable. So in this, if you actually look at, you'll never see MZ anywhere in this content. But just by decoding it, by putting the GIF89, making sure an AV engine and stuff won't look at it, and encoding the content with just simple with XOR, you can completely get the file itself across onto the box itself. So what we could do here is to kind of prove a point. We can where is it? This thing's still working. So as you see, I've done this before. 0 out of 42.
Yeah.
Yes. That's how I wanted to leave the presentation.